Hello, AHLISA. How are you guys doing? Hope you guys had a great weekend. Weather was beautiful. So my son and I, we actually decided to go camping. Yeah, not much of a camper. But when we got out there, it was time to build a fire. So my son asked, how do you build a fire? So I'm like, well, you just take two sticks and you rub them together, but you just have to make sure that the sticks are the same. To which my son then replies, oh, so then you'll have a match. And that is the joke of the day. All right then. But I do hope you had a great weekend. The weather was beautiful, so maybe you got out a little bit. Yeah. Okay. So for today, we're going to kind of shift focus a little bit and start talking about immigration. There are two big waves of immigration that happened in the 1800s, and they're simply known as old immigrants and new immigrants. So today, pay special note to basically how are these groups the same, um, and what's similar, what's not similar, that type of thing. Maybe you'll even see some similarities with your own immigration story, which you've been researching. Which reminder is due the end of next week. Okay, so make sure that, and that will be the last big grade for the quarter, last big grade of the year. Have that way. Also, just the way the week is going to play out. So you've got looking at these two waves of immigration today. Then we'll look at kind of an anti-immigrant sentiment on Wednesday. And then on Friday, you'll have that short essay looking at the experience of immigrants and then the way Native Americans were treated. So that's what the week kind of looks like for you. And that essay will be due over the course of the weekend. So you'll have the weekend to do that. Okay. So that's where we're at. Hope all is well. Stay safe, stay smart, and I'll talk to you guys later. So today we'll begin talking about these two massive waves of immigration that comes into the United States in the latter half, really, of the 1800s. So there's two waves that are simply known as old immigrants and new immigrants, and that is kind of what we will be talking about today. So old immigrants come in a wave basically from 1820 to 1880. Um, these immigrants are mostly coming from Western Europe. So you can see Great Britain, Ireland, West Germany. Um, and then towards the latter half of this wave, you see Scandinavians. So if you look at the time period 1820 to 1880, so this is while the United States is going through that first kind of industrial revolution, but this also includes the Civil War, slavery, westward expansion, right? So that's what's going on here. So why are these people coming over? So what's pushing them to leave is the Industrial Revolution, which happens earlier in Europe than it does in the United States. And what happens is as everything mechanizes, this hurts farmers. And so small independent farms are kind of being bought up to be turned into larger, more commercial farms. So small independent farmers sell their land, sell their farms, and come to the United States, where the United States is desperately looking for people to settle out west, right? It's manifest destiny, westward expansion. And then after the Civil War, which we were just talking about, is now that we've moved the Native Americans off that land, we have more land out there, land rushes, that type of thing. So they hear that there's cheap available land in the United States. That's what they know how to do. They're farmers, so they come here. Now, one group in particular are the Irish. The Irish are coming for different reasons. The Irish are coming because of the potato famine. And so the Irish are poor, and they have been made poor simply by policies beyond their control, in that Ireland is not an independent country. It's part of the British Commonwealth. And Ireland has kind of been like, the stepchild in the Commonwealth. And so there's not a lot of economic opportunity in Ireland. And so the Irish are poor to begin with. They're self sufficient farmers. Their subsistent crop is the potato. And Ireland has good soil, but not great soil. Lots of rocks in the soil. If you've been to Ireland, there are rock walls everywhere as a result of this. Um, and so when you're poor, a potato provides tons of nutrients. And so it's a valuable kind of like food commodity for you. And in the potato famine, the potato crop fails. And when the potato crop fails, the Irish begin to starve. And so now you're left with a choice. Do you starve to death in Ireland, or do you risk it all and come to the United States? And so they decide to millions, not millions of them, but the thousands upon thousands of them decide to risk it all and come to the United States. And so this group of old immigrants as a large group, they easily assimilate, meaning they easily blend in. Because when you think about it, if you think about these are British, Irish, West Germans, Scandinavians, these are people that started the country, right? So the first Americans came from these places. So in terms of this new group coming in, immigrating in, they kind of look like the people who are already here. Also, everyone in that group, for the most part, speaks English. Also, everyone in that group is familiar with a Democratic or Republican type of government. So you have that. The only group that's different from this are the Irish. And what you're going to see is that there's a pattern here, right? Um, and it's true in our world today that you pick on the people that are different. And so, with all these people coming, the Irish are the ones that are different. So, for example, all these other people come in, they look like everyone else, they all speak English, they all believe the same stuff. They come, they get to the United States, and they immediately move west. And they fill in all those empty spaces because they can afford to do so because they're coming with money. The Irish are different. They can't move west. So they stay in the cities. So they stay in New York. They stay in Philadelphia. They stay in Boston. And since they're staying and they're congregating in one place, they become noticeable. People see them, right? So now you don't as easily blend in. On top of that, what makes them different is that they're Catholic. And Catholicism was not a very well known religion back in this time. The country was Protestant, and Catholicism was something that was quite foreign to people here. They didn't know quite what to do with it. Um, Add into the fact that the Irish have large families, they're poor, all these things kind of make them the group that's kind of like singled out upon. So the Irish are going to do whatever it is they can to try to like fit in. And so what they do in huge numbers is that they join the military, they fight in the Civil War, they join police forces, fire departments, that type of thing, to again to show or just to prove that they want to be here and that they should be considered Americans. And you can see here, just in terms of numbers, who's coming in and when they're coming in. Now, the next wave after them are simply known as new immigrants. So you have old immigrants and new immigrants. So what's happening here is, again, it's farming, but now it's American competition. And so American competition is putting European farms kind of out of business. And European farms had kind of almost been like factory farms. So you weren't if you were a farmer in one of these big farms in Europe, you didn't own the land, you didn't quite know how to do everything. So when those farms begin to fail, these people now need jobs. And so they start flooding into European cities looking for factory work and that type of stuff. And unfortunately, they all can't find work. At the same time, you have factories kind of burgeoning now in the United States who need workers. And so you have American businesses advertising, looking for immigrants to work in their factories. Uh, so there's some recruiting of people to come this way. So where are they coming from? So the new group is coming mostly from Southern and Eastern Europe, so Austria, Hungary, Italy, and Russians, with Russian Jews making up more than half of all new immigrants who stay and actually settle here. Okay, there's a fine distinction here that more Italians are going to come than anybody else. Okay, but a lot of Italians are going to go back to Italy. The Russian Jews who arrive, they arrive and they stay. And why don't they go back is because they're fleeing religious persecution. These are the pogroms in which you have the Russian government or Eastern European governments who are basically singling out the Jewish populations, trying to drive them off their land, trying to impoverish them, taking away their rights, taking away their religious freedoms. And so for many of these Jews, they're coming to the United States seeking religious freedom, much like the pilgrims decades before them. These new immigrants come and they settle in cities. Again, they're not farmers, so they can't go out and settle out west. Also, There's no longer a lot of land available out west. These guys were coming to work in factories, so they're settling in cities, which means their population is felt. You see them. They don't spread out and fill in the country. They settle in one spot. They're also not easily assimilated. They look different. They believe different things than everyone else that's living here. So predominantly, religiously, these people are different. They're either Catholic or they're Jewish. They don't look like the people that are here, right? They have darker skin complexions. Try Northern Europeans are fairer skinned. Southern Europeans are a little bit darker skinned, a little more olive skinned. You have dark hair, dark beards. They don't speak English. They all tend to be poor, and they're coming from countries that don't have a history of a democratic or republican governments. Um, so again, they're not like the people that are here. And because they're all settling in cities, people feel the crush of all these new people. And so just to look at some numbers here, which again, you won't have to know these things, but just to give you a sense here, if you look at that census data at the top, 1860, the population of the country is 31 million people, right? By 1910, 50 years later, it's 92 million. Okay. So look at that, right? So from 1860 to 1900, the population more than doubles. Then, right, when you look from 1900 to 1910, look at that population jump. That is huge. And that population from 1900 to 1910, they're staying in cities. So if you look at this number, these data from 1890, in New York City, this is just for New York City, there are twice as many Irish living in New York than there are living in Dublin, twice as many Germans as living in the port city of Hamburg, half as many Italians as in Naples, 2.5 times as many Jews in New York as there is in Warsaw, the largest Jewish population in Europe. 4 out of every 5 New Yorkers, right? So 80% of the people living in New York in 1890 were either foreign born or were the children of foreign born parents. And that's 1890, right? So now go back up to the top of the screen and you look where the census is in 1890, right? Look what the population is going to do in the next 30 years. And again, in the next 30 years, all those people are going to settle in cities. So immigration is going to have a profound impact on our country in a short amount of time during this period. And there's going to be some resentment as a result of it. And that's something we can kind of begin talking about with our next class.